give me a great chance to kind of connect with all of you. So welcome, Tammy Miller.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. It's an honor to be here with you tonight and a privilege. I am so proud of Kim for all that she's accomplished and her commitment to education and her mission. And yes, way back when we met, we were both just trying to make a difference, and we keep connecting and helping each other through our common mission to help students and help teachers. So thank you so much for including me tonight. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to share my screen so I can pull the PowerPoint up for you. And let me get to the present mode. Okay, so is everyone, somebody tell me if you can see the screen, just so I can be clear. Okay, I see Kim's head nodding. Okay, good. All right. So the brain and reading, why learning to read is hard and what to do about it. So the reason that I'm here, what brings me to you, is my quest to figure out or to try to solve the reading problem, the reading crisis, for my entire career, really. And that's almost 37 plus years now. So all through these years, like many of you, I've continued to see students struggle with reading proficiently, and I've struggled to try to close that gap. And it's just been something that became my mission, regardless of what role I was fulfilling. I was really trying to figure out how to close that gap. So that's the topic for tonight. Just a few reminders about the webinar. So as Kim said, try to stay muted if you can. But of course, if something comes up and you really just need to add it or say it, unmute and let's hear it. 3 ways you can ask a question. You can add it to the chat box. You can send an email to info@readableenglish.com. You can go to readableenglish.com and fill out the contact us form. Please try to keep your other applications that use a lot of bandwidth closed during this time together to make it more successful. And you will get a link to this webinar tomorrow. So as we go down this road, I would like you to reflect for a minute. Have you noticed year after year, you might see the same patterns? We usually see the same students that are receiving extra services like an intervention in reading year after year. It typically doesn't change. It's the same students. I'm guessing a lot of you have seen that. Along with that, we also see students continue to struggle with comprehension. I'm sure that might ring a bell with many of you on this call as well. And I'm guessing that many of you wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't care and you weren't devoted educators. I've decided that I'm a self-proclaimed literacy warrior, and I have a feeling that many of you on this call tonight are as well, because of the commitment you're showing by simply being here this late on a Thursday night, and especially some of you who are already having a little vacation, as we heard earlier. So I want you to consider just, data always can make the hair stand up on your neck, right? But just think about this for a minute. For 30 years, almost 30 years, the NAEP organization, the National Association for Educational Progress, has collected data on reading, and it shows up in the nation's report card. So for almost 3 decades, nothing has changed. 65% of 4th graders this past year, 2019, well, 2 years ago, 2019, and 66% of 8th graders are just below proficient in reading, and it hasn't changed. And you can see the flat line in the graphs there. So you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why is this the case? Is it the teacher's fault? No. I see teachers working so hard So long, so many hours, weekends. Is it the students? Not really. What is the problem here? And so that's what we want to explore in our conversation this evening. What is happening? Why does this continue to be a problem? Because, you know, reading is just hard. And we see it in the classroom, and we see it particularly when they don't get it early and they go up the grade levels. You just see it the multiplier effect of that deficit. The language is the problem. The English language makes it extremely difficult to break the code. So take a look at this study. This study was completed by Professor Philip Seymour of the Dundee University in the UK. And what he did is he looked at the backgrounds of 14 different languages. And he was looking at students in their first year of learning to read their native language. Notice that most of the languages, students were able to read with proficiency above a 90% accuracy rate. And then you see it fall off a bit. But look at English. 35% accuracy in the first year. 35% accuracy and 2.5 years to become proficient to read English. And that is if you actually learn to read it well. So you begin to see at the root of this problem is really the language. So take a look at this slide. None of this will be a surprise to you. But for example, the letter U makes 7 different sounds. The C, cat, cell, cello, ocean. Sometimes the letters are silent. And the syllable breaks are not always clear. Do you pronounce it mishap or is it mishap? So this is the jungle that we're trying, or the maze that some of our students are trying to get through. More inconsistent rules. The silent E at the end of a word makes the vowel say its own name. Well, that's true for some words, but these are just a few exceptions. It's not true for love, gone, have, give. More inconsistent rules. When 2 vowels go walking, the first does the talking. I actually remember this from my early elementary years. And it's true for boat, sail, and beak, but it's not true for any of these words and many others. Lots of exceptions. So that leads us to the second reason that reading English is so hard. It's the cognitive load. So the cognitive load theory tells us that we want information to transfer from our working memory to our long-term memory. However, we can only process so much information at once, and too much information leads to cognitive overload. And I'm sure that you know what that feels like, especially in the classroom. But when a student or someone is trying to read English, if they don't have the automaticity and those words are not in their long-term memory, the cognitive demand is just too great. In fact, if you're looking at what it takes just to read 1,000 of the most common words, it's a lot of cognitive demand. 280 of the words are phonetic, but only 280. 350 of the words follow some rule that you have to know. There are 45 rules. 270 are exceptions, and the only way to know those words are to memorize them. And there's another 200 not accounted for in the graph that are actually just sight words that have to be memorized.
Tammy, you just got muted.
Yes, it popped up and said that I was muted, but I didn't click on it. I don't know. I guess it's a Zoom gremlin. So going back, basically, just to read the 1,000 most common words, a student has to know over 353 rules and exceptions and recall them with automaticity. Not just to know what they are, but they have to be instantaneous. In fact, they have to be recalled within 15 seconds or it's gone. So this cognitive load theory in reading translates like this. The cognitive load, having a reduced cognitive load in reading allows the working memory to process new words and move them to the long-term memory quickly. The goal is to have a high number of words in long-term memory, high word volume. That high word volume leads to fluency, which of course leads to comprehension. The second point about cognitive load theory is to transfer as many of these words as possible, as fast as possible. The third point is that the transfer can occur if the student is able to create a schema for that long-term memory. And if there's enough time, once it enters the brain, from the letter box at the base of the brain to the frontal lobe, for that automaticity to occur.
Tammy, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute because what this is really reminding me is, I don't know if you all have learned about the two islands, but you know, I always learned that the island of decoding is over here, which is your phonics and phonemic awareness skills, everything that you've kind of been talking about, the rules, you know, all of these things. And then the island of comprehension is over here. And if we don't have kids really able to be successful over on the island of decoding, then they certainly don't have the bandwidth to comprehend what they're reading. And it makes me think back to, like, you know, I mean, I remember a student was literally sitting there going, ta-ha-ah, ta-ha-ah. It's the, right? Like, if you can't, if you don't know the, you're not going to be over here going, well, I think this character, I infer that it's not happening because the island of decoding is never getting solidified. And as a fourth grade teacher, I will just tell you, I never knew how to teach phonics because when kids get to fourth grade, we're like way over here in comprehension. But the issue was that I had kids that were still stuck on the island of decoding. And I had a set of tools maybe that I would learn from like the first grade teacher, but I really didn't know what I was doing with them. And so I feel like we have kids who continue to go up through the grades who never got that foundational piece of phonics, phonemic awareness, and just all of those things, which makes a lot of sense to me when you're talking about that. It's so cognitively taxing on them if they don't have that foundational piece in place.
No, that's exactly right, Kim. And that therein lies the problem, right? Because they don't have a high word volume. So if they don't have a high word volume, their fluency is low and they can't comprehend as well. So, but unfortunately, a lot of the data that's collected after fourth grade is just comprehension. So we don't know,
sure.
Right? We don't really know what the root causes are. In fact, in Indiana, this past spring, there was the education committee met about this because they're looking at changing the structure of the state test to include more of this type of knowledge about the phonics and phonemic awareness in higher grade levels in the attempt to try and actually help, you know, the situation so we have better information about it. But you're exactly right. And here's the other thing that happens. So something called fossilization can also happen. And this is when the student doesn't know how to pronounce the word correctly and they're reading on their own. Maybe they've been sent back to work on a project or an assignment that the teacher's given, and they have to read independently. So as they're reading, if they don't have the correct pronunciation and spelling, and they can't hear it correctly in their own head and say it correctly, it can fossilize words incorrectly in the long-term memory. And it's very hard to get them out of the long-term memory once they're in there, because it has to be some kind of situation that's hindering their comprehension or their reading or a communication pattern. And I don't know about some of you, but there are words that in my home were probably pronounced incorrectly when I was growing up. And then as an adult, I was embarrassed to find out that I was actually saying the word incorrectly. Or if I'm going to be on a webinar like this and there's a new word that I don't know how to pronounce, it's a little bit intimidating until I can figure out how to pronounce the words. As a matter of fact, later I'm going to introduce one of our awesome teachers, and I was concerned that I was going to pronounce her name incorrectly. So I actually texted her to make sure that I could say her last name correctly because I was unsure about that. And funny, well, I'll tell you the funny story later, but fossilization is a real thing. And I worry because when I started to realize what was happening with fossilization, I think back to my years as a teacher. I loved independent reading time, but little did I know if I was allowing kids to read independently for 20 to 30 minutes to grow word volume, if they're reading words incorrectly, what am I really accomplishing with them? Maybe more confusion. So the last reason that reading is hard is that if a student is not having any success, they're not motivated. You know, like I wanted to learn how to play golf. So I went to the driving range and I took some lessons and I tried to practice, but I was no good. Like I was terrible. So I was making no progress. I don't play golf anymore. No motivation, no success. So we have our precious babies, our students that are struggling and they don't have any glimpse of success or glimpse of hope. So they become unmotivated. They expect to fail. And over time, you see that manifest itself in behaviors and low self-esteem and lots of other issues that are impacting not only their education, the education of others, and the school environment as a whole. And you all know this, you've seen it. In the past 5 years, doing the work that I've been doing with literacy, I have never seen it so clearly. When we have a student that turns around and their behavior totally changes, going from even kids that are 8th grade special ed that have been known bullies to becoming tutors in the school, and these kinds of behavioral changes have shown me how closely this reading deficit is tied to the motivation and the bad behaviors that can occur in students when a lot of it is just tied back to a deficit. So this is called the virtuous cycle of learning. And Daniel Willingham is, he's a cognitive psychologist from the University of Virginia, and he writes a lot about reading. He has one book that's called Raising Kids That Like to Read. Why Kids Don't Like School is another book that he has written. And he did not invent the virtuous cycle of learning, but he talks about it in relation to reading. So if you look at this wheel, you see it's really clear. The more a student reads words with accuracy, the better he becomes. Now, I think it's really important to think about that word accuracy. It isn't just reading, because we don't know if they're reading it accurately or not in some cases. So it's when they read accurately and get meaning and improve, they see the improvement. So the better they become, the more they like it, the more they like it, the more they want to read, the more accurate they are, the more words they have stored in their long-term memory, and the easier it gets to read. So what's happening? Like, what is going on in the brain, as Kim was referring to earlier, in the two hemispheres, islands in the brain? Well, here's the biggest problem. Reading is unnatural. Our brains were never wired to be able to read. Our brains were wired to develop language, not reading. So those natural connections aren't there in the brain. They're there for language, for communication, but not for reading. Now, this is a depiction of a brain from Stanislas Dehaene from France. He is a neuroscientist who specializes in reading at the College of France. And you might have seen his this is a pretty famous illustration about the brain and reading, so you might have seen it. But I just want to show you what's happening. If you look at the blue, these are the visual inputs. So the brain is picking up the visual inputs coming in the blue, then it transfers over to the red. This is the letter box at the base of the brain where the visual word form area is occurring. All right, so now the brain has to make some decisions. Well, if it goes out here to access pronunciation and articulation and it fails, it's over. So if the student doesn't have access to the pronunciation and articulation or the knowledge in the brain to do it, it's gone. But if they do, it connects to the meaning. The access to the meaning happens. And if it's already in the long-term memory, it can go straight to meaning from the letter box. So this is what we want to happen with our students. We want those visual inputs to come in, go through the letter word box, and go as fast as possible to meaning. If it goes this way, we want them to have correct pronunciation. With correct pronunciation, they can still get to the meaning and eventually become a part of the long-term memory. So this is what our challenge is. And this is the part of the brain that's unnatural. We weren't wired this way. So you see on this slide, this is our secret sauce. This is the secret sauce of reading and breaking the code. It's the integration of seeing the word, but seeing the word spelled correctly is critical, because the invented spelling or attempting only leads students down a dark hole. So they have to see it correctly, say it correctly, and hear it accurately in their brain, because it's connecting to the language development. The language development's already there, and it has lots of words that have already settled in the long-term memory. Now we're connecting that print with the meaning that's already there. But if that print doesn't match up with the correct spelling, pronunciation, it doesn't ever connect. It doesn't make sense. In this example, it might, for example, the student might think the word is ligate. So they have to have a way to pronounce it correctly to connect it to their understanding of the word light. Light is likely in their language, in their brain, but if they're pronouncing it ligate, no meaning occurs. So this is called orthographic mapping, and that's the secret sauce. But what's happening in the brain in orthographic mapping is that when we see a word, we're unconsciously and instantly recognizing those words. Like, I'm not still breaking words down and trying to remember the rules. I've got them. They already went into my long-term memory. All I care about is that I got a lot of words in my long-term memory. I don't really care how they got there. I just want to be able to read them, say them correctly, and know what they mean. And that's what happens to those of us who are literate adults. So what we want to do is focus on the meaning of what we're reading, not on just simply trying to decode the words and recognize them. We want that word volume to be there so we can focus on the meaning. Okay, so now we know what the problem is. We know how the brain works. What are we going to do about it? So I'm going to take you back to a story. So I told you my whole career, I've been searching and searching for this answer, like what to do about this problem, like I think probably many of you have. And in my quest, at one point I was a principal and I even became a reading recovery certified teacher simultaneously in my quest to get answers. So most of the tools that are out there, I have either been trained and certified in them, or I have purchased them for teachers or for districts. Because in my 37 years, I've done about all the jobs. I've been a teacher, I've been a principal, and I've been a district administrator over the elementary schools, I've been an adjunct professor, and now I'm a consultant. I'm a national consultant for school turnaround. So I go across the country to different schools that are struggling. And I'll give you one guess. Why are schools struggling? It's always the same. It doesn't matter what state I'm in or what the situation is. It's always reading. Now, are there other issues? Always. There are always socioeconomic influences, of course. And in general, sometimes there's just chaos in the school. But when you really get down to it and you look at the reading data, the kids can't read. I have a school right now that has a 3% pass rate in reading. I have another school that has a pass rate of 11%. So this is real, folks. It's real. It's a real problem. But here's what happened. After a while, I left the district office where I had the good fortune to meet Kim, and I went to work at a company called Solution Tree. Some of you might have heard of it. They're famous for their work with professional learning communities, which is awesome. Saved my school and changed my life as a teacher, as a principal. While I was at Solution Tree, my job was to help them create a new turnaround model for schools. So I was working on that happily and loving it, and it was a great, awesome job. I also had a reputation in my community in Bloomington, Indiana, of being a literacy warrior. So one of the vice presidents went to Australia to the EdTech International Conference and saw a presentation on Readable English. That executive brought the book back to me and put it on my desk. I picked up the book and I had a physical reaction after reading about 10 pages. I was learning more than I had ever thought possible about what was going on with the brain and reading. And I had a strong sense that I might have the answer. I might have an answer in my hands. And I was so moved, I immediately tried to reach out to the company, but I was frustrated because they were in Australia. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be 24 hours before anybody calls me back. And I want to know now how I'm going to fix this. Well, actually, what happened was the creator of Readable English had moved back to the United States, to California. She got the email and called me the same day. So that same day, in a 2.5-hour conversation later, I asked for a free pilot because I'd begun to make up my mind that I was going to go back out into the field as an administrator or a teacher, and I was going to see if this would work. And that's exactly what I did. So I left my wonderful, awesome, cush job at Solution Tree, and I went back out into the Wild West. And the Wild West that I went to, if any of you know about alternative education, that's what I did. I took over director of 22 alternative education sites in Indiana. So these are the precious babies that didn't make it in regular school through high school to get a diploma. And this is maybe their last chance. I hope it's not their last chance, but that's kind of how it's looked at. So they're in the alternative ed program and they've got all kinds of other problems, right? They're on probation. They have ankle bracelets. They're on house arrest. They're pregnant. They have lots of issues and they have very poor social skills. So they break out in fights during school all the time. So that's what I went to. I left my awesome job and took a big pay cut. And I went out to look at this situation to see if Readable English would help that group of kids. And you'll hear a story, I hope, before we get off this call today from a young lady that's on this call that witnessed one of those testimonials of a student in that charter school that was using Readable English. What happened was we had two groups. One group of students did not get Readable English and they were in a separate location, and at a totally different site, these students did receive Readable English. The students who received Readable English, in 3 months, they took the end of course assessment in Indiana. Back then in 2016, you had to pass that test to get a diploma. And typically it would be taken at the end of the year. I think they just wanted to take it sooner because they wanted to see. So they all took it and they tripled the pass rate. Typically in that organization, 1 or 2 students per site would pass the test. All of a sudden, 9 students passed and 2 missed it by 1 point out of 15 kids in 3 months. Now, let me tell you about alternative education. If you don't know, what I learned from this experience is that these young people that can't read very well, Our average was about between 3rd and 5th grade reading level. And what we do as a profession for alternative ed typically is that we put them on a program like Plato. And Plato is course recovery for the credits they didn't get, for the classes they didn't pass. But it's all online and they have to read everything. Well, these students can't read very well, which was also a part of the core of their problem in school. So now what have we done? We've put them in front of a screen all day to do course recovery for material that they can't read that well. But here's what happened. And you're going to see shortly with Readable English, they were able to use all of their course content through this mechanism so they could read it and grow their word volume, which meant then they were able to pass those tests for their courses and they did much better on the end of course assessment. So this book changed my life. It changed the life of teachers and students. And here's an unexpected outcome. Our amazing teachers, I'm just not sure there's anything more amazing than a teacher in our society. But what's happened to our teachers is they get burned out. And they have students coming through that can't read, and no matter what we do, we can't get them there. And it's defeating. It makes it feel like it's our fault or their fault, and we don't know, but they just can't get there. But here's what happened to Miss Janice Kossel in Kokomo, Indiana. Her 8th grade special ed students learned how to read that year. She didn't know what to do. Like, what she had been doing was helping them get their homework done and maybe reading things to them because they couldn't read. And then all of a sudden they could read. So she will tell you a story. There's a clip on our website. And she talks about how after this happened, she couldn't wait to get to work. She would go to work at 6:30 in the morning every day. She changed. She was rejuvenated and energized because she saw the growth that she was now impacting. And our teachers need that. We need to see that growth. That's our fuel. That's what keeps us going. So some of you might have heard of Sally Shaywitz. She's pretty famous in reading research and dyslexia. But she points out the obvious. We got a lot of knowledge about what needs to happen. So it's not a knowledge gap, it's the action gap. And part of that action is not having the tools that properly address the complexity of the English language, the cognitive demand, the pronunciation issues, and the motivation piece to have instant success. Until Readable English. I'm going to show you this very short clip so that you have an idea of the first part of Readable English. Oopsie.
Readable English removes the difficulties of learning to read in English.
Can you hear it,
with
Kim?
3 simple steps. First, words are broken up into readable chunks. Then, the letters that are not pronounced are simply grayed out, keeping the spelling intact. And lastly, when a letter makes a sound other than its usual sound, we put a glyph on it.
So you notice the letters you don't pronounce are grayed out. The dots are the syllable breaks in the way that you pronounce the word. And you see the symbol that we call a glyph, and those symbols never change. It's always the same sound. When you see the symbol, it doesn't matter what letter it's above, it's the same sound. So take a look at these pronunciation guides. Now, I don't know about you, but the first two have never actually been useful for me. But look at Readable English. The spelling is kept intact. I know how to pronounce the word properly with the syllable breaks marked. And I have the symbols that tell me the sound with certainty. There's no exceptions ever. It's always the same. So just to give you a quick glimpse, There are 21 glyphs and they have mnemonic names, so they're easy to remember. These glyphs can be learned in about 5 weeks, and they actually lessen the cognitive load. They also can be used in tandem with any type of phonics program that you already have in place. And what we find time after time after time is that this does not confuse, but actually lightens the load and brings clarity and confidence. Because students, after they know the glyphs, will start to say, I can read now. I can read. And I want to point out, if you look, let's say at infinite, you see here that it's the same sound above 5 different letters. So when you see the symbol, it's always the same sound. So this is the magic of Readable English. It's called the conversion tool. And what happens is any curriculum can be downloaded from a digital source or taken in through a scanner, either way, into this tool. Students can also take anything off of the internet and put it in this tool. Sometimes teachers scan parts of materials in, but this is the magic that grows the word volume. So I want to tell you, when I first saw this, before I left Solution Tree, I said, if you have to have the conversion tool to read, this is worthless. If this transfers to the long-term memory, this is a miracle. And I had to find out, because this wasn't in the United States anywhere. In fact, it wasn't really in the market. I had just had this miraculous situation where I was almost called to this. And I felt hugely responsible to see if it worked. So guess what? I wouldn't be talking to you today if you had to have the conversion tool to be able to read, because it wouldn't be worth anything. So what happens is, this is a shortcut. You know, all those rules and exceptions that get stuck and they go out in the other part of the brain and they don't make it to the long-term memory. Now they can, and they do. And you're going to hear the stories of all the kids of how that worked. I had a teacher tell me today at a school that they had an emotionally handicapped child that was not actually a non-reader, but a very poor reader. And as of today, he has 45,000 words in his word count, because we have a built-in word counter so students can track their progress, kids can track their progress, as well as words correct per minute. Because the other message here from me is that as a profession, we have got to start focusing on grade level equivalency. A lot of the tools that are out there for us, they're great tools, but they're deceiving. Sometimes our red, yellow, green represents only 30th percentile. 30th percentile is not good. I don't want my child at the 30th percentile, but then it's deceiving. We need grade level equivalency. That's what's going to change. That's the game changer for these kids. And it's also the game changer for our profession. So we have two things. We now have a tool, and you'll hear stories that there are kids getting to grade level in 1 year. And we have that tool so that we can get them to grade level, because it's possible. So it transfers to standard English, and it transfers fast. They just need the practice in the conversion tool. So we say all the time, read in the conversion in the font as much as you can, because it transfers. In fact, heard another story this week. 4th grade student, top of her class, loves the play Hamilton, loves it. Wanted to read something from the Federal Registry, and she had all these things. She couldn't read any of it. High student. They put what she wanted to read in the conversion tool. She can read it now. And guess what's happened to her academic vocabulary? Her ability to use context clues? She's stretching, she's growing, and she's not a struggling reader, but she's getting there faster because it's transferring quickly. So when we think about what's going on here, the students are breaking the code, and they know it. And that starts to build their confidence. And they start to walk a little taller. And you'll hear a story from Miss Becky about a student who told her today that he's going to beat so-and-so who's already at 42,000 words. And this was a kid that was at a first grade reading level and he's in 5th grade. So it removes the complexities of the language. The cognitive load is reduced. It removes fossilization and students experience success quickly. Miss Becky Mungle is on the call with us right now. Becky, are you able to unmute? Or do I have to unmute you? No, you're there. Okay, good. So Becky is the principal of Templeton Elementary in Bloomington, Indiana. And I wanted her to just share some of the data that she got last year. This is her 3rd year of implementation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Tammy. Anytime I get a chance to talk about my school, you know I love to do that. This slide, I will share. So I've been a principal for 18 years, 25 in education total. And Tammy made a great point. It seems that every year the same students were finding themselves in tier 2 and tier 3. It was like a life sentence, like they were never able to graduate and ever reach grade level like Tammy has talked about. And so for me, finding Readable English, I piloted this program in 2018. We used it in 3rd grade. And the slide in front of you shows all the students tier 2 and tier 3. So tier 2 is typically just less than a year. And tier 3 students are more than a year behind reading at grade level. So tier 2 and tier 3 students in 2018 had the same exact interventions, except all of our tier 3 students who were further behind, we also gave them Readable English. Also in Indiana, we have to take an assessment in 3rd grade called I Read. And these are the results from that assessment. You'll see there to the right, every single student who was the furthest behind, all of them that received the additional support through Readable English passed the state test. Sadly, to the left, you will note that none of the students in standard supports, whatever it is that your school might be using, I know what our school is using, they were given that tier 2 support, and not one of the students in tier 2 passed I Read that year. So while incredibly disappointing, it was very enlightening also to recognize now that we actually have a tool that can fix the literacy problem. So our next slide, this was the next year. So of course I ran to the district office and I talked with my assistant superintendent and I said, look, this is what happened. These are the results I got. Can we please expand the pilot? So they allowed us to do that, gather more data. This was last year. And of course, the year was cut short because of COVID. However, these are the winter benchmark scores. We implemented then in all of 3rd and 4th grade, tier 2 and tier 3. So we expanded that. And you'll note there, this is results from an assessment, a standardized assessment called Exact Path. We use that for students 3rd through 6th grade in my school. So at the beginning, you'll note there to the far left, our Readable English students, so these would be Gen Ed students, scored at a 36.7. Expected growth as set by Exact Path was 38.5. So our Gen Ed population just didn't quite make the mark. We just missed it. If you'll note to the far right, from the fall to the winter benchmark, our Readable English students were almost 2 times ahead in reading than their grade level peers. I can also share that we just finished our winter benchmark this year in our school in February, and we are seeing extremely similar results. We actually expanded this year to all tier 2 and tier 3, 3rd through 6th grade, as well as all of our students in 3rd grade. And again, Readable English students are outperforming their grade level peers nearly 2 times. Today, Tammy mentioned the story I was going to share with you. So I have a student who is highly motivated by his word count. And he's like, hey, I just read such and such, how many words? We're going to make sure that that showed up. So we'll go and look at it. Well, come to find out, the students were talking and he was realizing that there's another student that has about, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 more words than him. And he was like, oh, when I go home this weekend, he's going to be playing video games and I'm going to be reading. And so this is a student that would not have ever said that. So I think the piece for me as an elementary principal, when I watch the transformation of the student, not just academically, but behaviorally and socially, to me, I feel like that is just a double win-win. And so for me, I would encourage anyone that has an opportunity to give this program a try, that you should, because it works. Hence,
And-
my last slide. I know it seems a little cheeky, but it's really the truth. If you don't use it, your students don't grow. If you do use it, they do. And I've not had one student that has used Readable English with the conversion tool not show growth in either standardized tests or progress monitoring or whatever the assessment might have been. So thank you for giving me a chance to share, Tammy.
And Becky, when they have the standardized test, are they allowed to use the conversion tool?
No, they are not.
Yeah.
And that's what's really great. We did some progress monitoring today, and every fifth grader who started at a variety of different places, first, second, or third grade at the beginning of this school year, we progress monitored, we did our benchmarking. Every single one of them now read at a fifth grade level in April, as of today. So we feel like we have successfully supported them and got them to grade level this year.
And so Becky, were any of them lower than third grade that are now at grade level?
Yes, well, there's two that I know of. I actually learned to teach Readable English this summer, so I thought that was really important as well. So I did all the training, and of course we started online at the beginning of the year. So I learned how to teach all the glyphs. We can get it done in 5 weeks. I also learned how to help kids convert text from all different curriculum. It's very versatile. And so I have, actually my groups have grown. I started with 2. I actually have 4 or 5 groups now that I meet with. And we're just reading in the conversion tool and progress monitoring every day. And yeah, we're just seeing some great success, great strides, and great, not only intrinsic motivation, but just their self-esteem is growing as well. So.
Yeah, well, and I think it's been fun to watch Becky, because what I believe is that she would get 1 or 2 of them really soaring, and then she'd go get more. Give me another one. Give me another one. So she's staying at school till 7 o'clock at night to do the other work, so she can keep taking kids, because she's found a way to do it that's working.
It's working. Yes.
So we talked about the cognitive load theory. I'd never heard of the cognitive load theory until I read the Readable English book. It's supposed to be the most important piece of research that teachers should know about. John Sweller is from Australia, and he is a huge advocate for Readable English. And we actually have an interview with him where he talks about how this is going to change the way we teach reading, because it reduces the cognitive load. So I've got some friends with us tonight, and I don't know who's here and who isn't here, but I'm just going to call out the ones that I saw. Lou Keene is an interventionist and literacy expert from Needmore Elementary in, excuse me, Bedford, Indiana. Lou, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So Lou, would you be willing to share any stories that any of what you've witnessed with Readable English this year?
I would love to. This year, I've taught basically first grade and kindergarten for 37 years. And so teaching reading was my passion. And this year I had the opportunity to be a reading specialist. However, because of COVID, I'm teaching second grade virtually. And it gave me the opportunity. My principal came in and said, we have a few students that are far below grade level in third grade. Could I squeeze in and work with some of them? And so I started I'm going to just highlight there. I could tell you stories on all the students, but I'm going to highlight this one in particular. A third grade student who I gave a phonics quiz to at the beginning of the year. And the only thing he could pass was consonant, vowel, consonant words. He read 15 words per minute, and he's a third grader. And so I started teaching him phonics, basically, just like I would a first grader. and he was really struggling with all the rules. And he would forget all the rules. And every day he would come back, he would remember some, but he would forget some. And so then around October, when when I heard about Readable English, I mean, I just fell in love with it because I want to try something new. I want to try something that works. And so I said, can I do that with them? And so I started doing it, and I am not an expert at all in Readable English because basically I just started around November. But this little guy learned all the glyphs in 3 weeks. He knew them before he left for Christmas break. He knew all of them. And he was so excited. All of the students that learned the glyphs were so excited. They loved all the little games that we had. I mean, their whole personification changed when they came into the room because they were excited. They wanted to read. And just today, I asked this little boy, I said, can you tell me your success? How do you feel about reading now? Because he was the jokester. He would come in and he would push his chair back. He would try to make jokes because he didn't want to do any of the work. So he wanted to just be the jokester. And so now he's so excited about reading. And I asked him today, I said, your teacher is so proud of you. Our principal is so proud of you. And I'm so proud of you. Can you tell me in your own words, what changed for you? And I'm going to read exactly what he said. The grammar's not perfect, but I want you to hear what he said. It helps me get more better at reading. Readable English made the difference for me. The first time I started learning the glyphs, I felt better. I wanted to keep practicing, and it's almost making me cry.
I know.
To keep practicing and practicing to get better and better. He said, I set a goal and I told my teacher, I want to read 100 words correctly in a minute. And so I wanted to tell all of you that I started him out on first grade reading passages in Readable English because that's basically where he was. He was a beginning first grade reader, and Readable English just opened the doors for him. He was started out on a first grade reading passage at 39 words per minute, which, you know, he felt better because he was reading 15. And that was in December after he learned all the glyphs. And then in January, he had a couple weeks off where he was out because of COVID. And so we worked ourselves up to 60, and then he was gone for 2 weeks and we dropped down to 50. When he came back from COVID, I told Mrs. Petty, my principal, I said, you know, his accuracy rate is like 99%. Let's try a second grade passage. So we tried second grade passages, and he was reading 59 with 97% accuracy. So the last couple weeks, I started giving him third grade passages. I started in March 5th. I gave him a third grade passage. He read 76 words per minute with 99% accuracy. And on March the 12th, he read 79 words per minute with 99% accuracy on a third grade passage from Easy CBN.
Yes.
He's so excited. And, you know, the best thing about it is he loves it. And he loves school now, and he loves reading. And that's the key. It's just because he was the one of them that he didn't want to be there, push the chair back, act like the jokester. Just a total turnaround.
Yep. Lou, I had to hold it together because that's quite an emotional story. You know, that is and this is not rare. I mean, this is like actually becoming the norm of the stories that come out, especially this time of the year. It's coming a little later because of COVID, but it's all starting to click, especially for these kids that have struggled for so long. Let me see, let's see, is Jody, are you here? Is Jody French on?
I didn't see her.
Okay, and then Marianne is the principal of West Washington in Campbellsburg, Indiana.
Hello.
Okay, so I am the principal, grades 7 through 12, and we decided to implement this with our 7th and 8th grade students that were struggling readers. And I could tell a whole lot of success stories, but one of the things I want to point out, if you're used to working with junior high students, you know that sometimes they can be a little challenging because they have already fossilize those ways of reading and doing things incorrectly. So with those students, you know, there's always that worry of, are they going to think that this is too childish, or are they going to, you know, buy into it? But I want to share just a couple of students in the 7th grade. We got a late start because our beginning of the year was crazy with COVID and all of that. And we actually started implementing around November. And one of the students in 7th grade was reading at 125 words per minute, which was about the 45th percentile, which is not drastically low, but still not where we want them to be. And then we did some more progress monitoring in March, and that student is now up to 165 words per minute. And with that, he's now in the 75th percentile, and our goal is to be in the 90th percentile, which because, you know, 50th percentile to me as a principal is not where I want my students. It's not where the teachers want their students. And the goal is to be at 202 words by the end of the year. So the student really is falling close to the 50th percentile at the beginning of the year, now up into the 75th percentile. And with that, what we are doing is making sure that once they are feeling confident with the process of reading, that they are actually doing comprehension strategies as well. So that way we know they're not just reading the words, but they're actually comprehending how to do the different strategies with the mapping and things like that. So that way we are focusing on the whole reading aspect and not just the words per minute. I saw someone asked a question about that. And we're trying to make it fun for them. I actually had them create little videos of some of the glyphs that were their favorites. And one student that we have, he is very, very backwards. 81 words per minute at the beginning. He was like in the 10th percentile. He just would not open up. He would not read out loud. He'd had a very traumatic younger childhood things had happened to him, and he now is up in the 25th percentile. And the story with him is that when we were making these videos, he came out of his shell and he was just like, I don't smile. I don't, you know, he didn't want to do anything. And we got him in front of the camera and he did it and he enjoyed it. And you could tell that he was really proud of himself. And I really think that without Readable English, he would have never been able to do that. And it has just built that confidence that we're seeing that is so needed even at a 7th and 8th grade level.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And especially, you know, our middle schoolers, that we find over and over again that we don't have a true gauge on how low some of them are with reading, because they've been passed along and we're ready to do serious content. And there's no place to do the reading piece at this point. But when you really go in and you find a school that's struggling, or there's always kids at the middle school level that are not able to read proficiently. It's really where we have to really look at that population. So Kim, I had one more story, but it's 9 o'clock. So what do you think we should do? Should we just let people go? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think we should let them know what, where to go next, and where they can get more information or ask if they have any questions. I think let's go there for a few minutes, but yeah, we probably want to close it up and let people get back, but.
Yes. So the website address is listed here, www.readableenglish.com, and there's a contact form there. So you can fill out your contact form and that'll come into Readable English. You know, if you wanted to contact me directly, I can put my phone number in the chat box also, and I'd be happy to, you know, talk with anybody really. And given the situation right now, we, you know, in education, we have a learning loss. I mean, that's what's happened, right? We, in spite of our best efforts, we've had a lot of disruption. But think about the fact that there was already a problem before the disruption in many cases. So it's even more dramatic and there's more urgency than ever. So we really want to do what we can to help. If you find that you have dollars available, great. If you find that you can't find the dollars, let me know and we'll see what we can do to help you. There is a lot of money that has come out, right, from ESSER and the COVID recovery. So schools and districts right now do have funds available. But if you're struggling, our CEO, Ann Fitz, who created Readable English, doesn't want any child to not be able to read. So whatever we have to do to help, we will help you do. I'm trying to get back to my chat box here. Let me get out of the presentation and go to the chat box so I can put my info in there.
And while you're doing that, Tammy, I will just say that when you introduced this idea to me about a year ago, I mean, you know, I just know who you are at the core of your being, that you're a very mission-minded person. You're a good faith person. So I wasn't surprised, but it did still take me, it did kind of shock me because you were so passionate about this, that you are on a mission to prove to yourself that this can really do what you thought it could. And I remember you even saying that you went into some schools that had very high poverty rates and many, many struggling readers. And you did like hours and hours, just like it was your own mission project. Like there was no pay tied to this. You just had to go in schools and run the data yourself. Because sometimes, you know, I think that we're like, oh, we can find data for anything. But I think for you, it became such an integral personal mission that you were like, okay, I believe this, but I still have to go in and put my hundreds of hours in, and I need to see this for myself, that I'm going to get the same data that they've been getting. And I was just so impressed by that because, you know, I just think you are a literacy warrior, and we've all have a heart for kids. We know what happens when they cannot read. And I know for me, I mean, I felt like I was a strong fourth grade teacher, but you know, I had a set of tools that I used with all struggling readers, right? Because that's all that I knew back then. And even now, when we get called in to do like comprehension strategies with schools, they're like, hey, well, can we get Strobel Education to come in and teach comprehension mini lessons to our teachers? If you're asking us to come in and do that because you have mostly struggling readers, I can't with good faith even do that, because it's going to be a waste of your dollars. You know what I'm saying? If they don't have the foundational piece in place, that's just been such an aha to me.
Thank you for saying that, Kim. I totally forgot to say that part about the pilots, right?
Yes, you spent hours doing that.
I know, I can't believe I didn't say it. So what happened was, when I went out to the charter schools, after that, I had to get out of that business because it was a little too wild for me. But I started going across the country doing school turnaround for Solution Tree. But when I wasn't on the road, I set up pilots. So I started working to help Readable English grow, but I wasn't paid to do it. And I did that for 4 years for no pay to get the data, because I had to be sure that this was going to work. You know, my name, my reputation, my credibility, and my time have to be invested in the right things. And I'll just recognize Carol Gardner. Wave, Carol. So Carol, bless her heart, she retired after, she retired 3 times because we just wouldn't let her stop in education. And what she did, I had to still have an income. So I had to keep traveling around the country doing school turnaround. But Carol retired and she worked for Readable English for free also, because this is just totally a new invention, a new thing. And Carol kept it going for a year because I couldn't have worked for no pay at all for a year. So
And I'm just going to say, Carol and Tammy are also standards-based grading gurus, and we do a ton of standards-based grading work with schools. And I have been after them because I have so many schools that are wanting standards-based grading. And these two are so tied to readable English. They are like, I'm all about readable English, and that's all I want to do right now, Kim. And so I was like, I need you for standards-based grading, but they are so passionate about this reading, this literacy stuff that I have to respect it. But you guys are just amazing. And if you guys have any questions, Tammy has her email. If you want to set up a time to chat with her further about this, to ask about how it works, what the pricing is, who you roll it out to, all of those things. It's always hard with these webinars, you know, because it's like, you don't want to come across as salesy, but I just want you guys to know that this is something that we're so passionate about. And I love what you said, Tammy, too, is even the creator of this is like, she just wants kids to be able to read, you know?
That's right.
So I just felt like it was so important to put this out there. And I think we're also going to do, and I don't know if any of you are interested, but we thought about doing like a little mini series on this summer for some certificates of completion, like a 2 or 3 hour training on just understanding more of the issues around reading and what we can possibly do about that. So we might do a little bit more on this as well. I have a college kid in the house who forgets that his mom works from home. So he just barreled up the steps. He's like yelling frantically to play with the dogs. If you hear all this background noise, it's because you can be almost 21 years old and still want to suck the life out of your mama sometimes. But I thank you all for being here tonight. And thanks for everybody who shared their story. Gosh, that's just really inspiring too. So there's Tammy's email. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help you guys. And Tammy, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all. I mean, I am so in awe that you're all on here so late on a Thursday night because you want to do more for your kids. And I just appreciate you. I hold teachers in the highest esteem. Thank you for all that you're doing for our kids. I appreciate the hard work you've done this year. I do want to let you know also that Justine is on this call and she has a remarkable story she didn't get to tell. She's going to stay on. Anybody who wants to stay, please feel welcome. Don't feel obligated, but it is a great story if you have time to stay. And I thank you, Kim, from the bottom of my heart for opening the doors for us to your followers. And I hope that some of you give it a try.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave because I also have a little niece and nephew who have just popped in to see their Aunt Kimmy from out of town. So I'm going to leave, and I thank you all. And anybody that wants to stay on and ask some questions, please do so. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you. Justine, do you want to tell
All
your...
right. So many of you are logging off, but Mary, I see you. I hear you. Great question. So I got the opportunity to cross paths with Tammy when we were both in the charter network of alternative schools. And hopefully people hear this on the recording because I do have a background with ELs, former administrator in Chicago Public Schools, teacher in Indianapolis Public, and then was eventually in the same charter network with Tammy. I was promoted to superintendent. But at the time, I believe it was your very first pilot, Tammy?
Yes.
I founded a high school in Indianapolis, one of the campuses, as well as East Chicago. And prior to moving the superintendent role, I said, yes, I'll try anything because like many of you on this call, you're here for a reason. And even just the title of the webinar, right? It's not about the test scores, it's about the student behind the test scores. So we all know that we want incredible results, but it's about the person and the little human or sometimes almost adult human. But Mary, your question, especially in the United States, with ELs being our fastest growing demographic as far as student subgroups, Indiana actually has consistently had the second fastest growing EL population in the entire country. at the school I founded, one of our students that enrolled was named Georgie. I will try not to cry when I tell this story. So Georgie was born in Haiti, and he witnessed both of his parents being murdered. And when he came to the States, he was adopted at age 12. He enrolled in a traditional high school, was already starting to get in trouble by freshman year, obviously didn't speak English super well, and was not his first language. He came to our campus. He said, I'll do anything to read. I think he just wanted to be done with school, and so many experiences, right, that were very tough for him. And so he would get transported to another sister campus, so to speak, and Tammy made that happen. And she was researching and watching. This kid jumped from literally like a 3rd grade reading level to an 11th grade reading level in a matter of 5 to 6 months. He was a high schooler. He would end up graduating early. And this is just personal work, right? It's personal for all of us. And going back to how Kim started, you know, she talked about being bold. And if you have questions, or no matter what role you're in a school, it can be really scary to go, wow, nobody knows about this. People are going to think I'm crazy. Like, nobody's going to believe this works. And believe me, those are the same questions that like I was probing Tammy with when she was like, well, can we try this? And I'm like, well, I'll try anything. So to answer your question, even with a kid who so much trauma, did not speak English as his first language, yes, and yes. For newcomer students, for ELs at any level, according to WIDA, yes. So that's all I have to share. But, you know, we find this work and we find ourselves, you know, there's a national conversation about equity in particular, and we hear that word a lot. And we have to remember, if we want to be equitable, we have to make bold choices as educators, and we have to do whatever it takes, because if we don't provide literacy to students, then we're ultimately denying them just a living right. It's really a civil rights issue if we're not doing that. So I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks for letting me share, guys. Sorry, I teared up a little bit.